Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes. My name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen, and welcome to another Dungeons and Discussions. And today, we're talking characters. Specifically, we're talking characters within the realms of first, worst, latest, and greatest. Now, what in the hell does that mean? Well, to put it bluntly, we're going to be talking about 4 characters throughout the course of our D&D play. For me, I'm doing Dungeons & Dragons specifically because that's the game I've played the most. But really, this is just an exercise in sort of looking back on the characters you've made both recently and in the far past to sort of reignite that flame, to really get that fire burning in your belly to go out and find some games. Because as much as I appreciate people watching my channel, it really doesn't mean much if you're not actually playing the games. If you're not actually going out and playing the games, if you're just watching live plays, watching YouTubers like myself talk about it, you're not really that involved. You're not really experiencing what these games have to offer. So I want you to practice this exercise if you've been out of play for a while, or even if you're playing now but you're looking to get a little bit more involved, maybe become a little more active and play more frequently, find another game to play, but you're thinking about it and just really haven't felt that drive. This exercise is to help you with that. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our first character, our worst character, and in this case I'm talking worst in terms of satisfaction of play. I'm not talking in terms of specifically worst role played, worst mechanically, although you can do that if you wish, but for me, I'm talking about satisfaction of play. First character, worst character, latest character, greatest character, meaning my favorite. So without any further ado, let's get started. So my first ever character, well, obviously it requires a little bit of backstory. And I remember summer of probably 1995, 1996. I was living up in the mountains and I called up my buddy Jimmy to see if he wanted to hang out that day. He said, yeah, sure, come over, we'll play some video games. So I go over, head into his house, come inside, and I noticed that he's not set up in front of the TV with the PlayStation on. He's sitting with his stepdad at a table in the corner. There's a heap of books on the table, a bunch of papers laid out in front of him. They're rolling some dice, jotting some things down, and his stepdad is narrating something to him. He's narrating his explorations through a place called the Sunless Citadel. A classic Dungeons & Dragons adventure. A lot of people who have played D&D for any decent amount of time have probably heard that name at least once or twice. It's a classic pre-made adventure. And, well, when I came in, his stepdad Steve flagged me down and said, "Hey, Dave, come here, sit down, join us, I think you'll like this." And thus I was introduced to Dungeons & Dragons and the world of tabletop gaming. And my first character, technically speaking, wasn't my character. It was a character that Steve made, or an NPC that he made. An elven cleric of Corellin Larethian. I don't remember her name. I really don't remember much about her because I was 10. And this was the first time I ever played D&D. But with Steve and Jimmy's help, I was able to get the basics of the game down, and I started to really see how this could be a lot of fun. And so, from there, I made my first actual character, who may as well have been that elven cleric of Corellin Larethian. The only difference being, it was a human cleric of Hyronius. For those unaware, this was during D&D 3rd edition, the early days of it. And D&D 3rd edition used the Greyhawk deities, the Greyhawk setting for its world. So the deities included in the book were the Greyhawk deities, of which Hyronius is one of them, the god of valor and heroes. So my first character that I made was a cleric of Hyronius. Because when I read Corellin Larethian and I decided, well, I kind of want to make a human because they get some cool things. I liked the extra skill point and the extra feat at the beginning. I started thinking, well, I can't just do Corellin Larethian because he's a human. Corellin Larethian's the god of the elves. I'll do this guy. He's kind of cool looking. He's like a knight. Hyronius, god of valor. All right, yeah, that's cool. There really wasn't a whole lot there, but there rarely ever is with our first characters. They're our introduction to the world, our introduction to the game. And my character, who was essentially that cleric Steve made for me, he walked me through that process after we played a few sessions in the Sunless Citadel and completed it. Well, he opened the door to the world of tabletop gaming. Just as the same with all of our first characters. Now, just because he was my first character, and just because they have a special place in my heart, even though I honestly don't remember the character's name, doesn't mean they were particularly good. And if we're being honest, no one can say that all of the characters we've made have been particularly good. We've all made characters that we've been dissatisfied with. And now I want to talk about that. My worst character. I made this character for a game I was running with my friend Mike probably about 5 or 6 years ago. It was a 3.5 edition game. That was his preferred edition, and so we used that rule set. But he did allow me to bring some of the Pathfinder stuff into it since it transferred over pretty nicely. Basically, we used the Pathfinder rule set to sort of give a little more oomph to the player characters and the monsters, but most of it was 3.5. Now, the crazy thing about this game, because Mike's games were always very crazy, he had a little trick up his sleeve that he was playing with. We would all be starting new characters, but each of our characters would have in their possession, not to their knowledge for the most part, unless we could provide a reasonable reason why, a legendary artifact. Everyone had a different one. One of our characters, I remember, actually lived in Baba Yaga's hut without realizing it. But my character that I made at the time was one that ended up not really fitting too well with the other ones present because of the fact that I really wasn't informed too much on what the game is about ahead of time. And to be fair, that is on Mike. That is something that really, as DMs and GMs, we should be informing our players of, at least to a degree, of what the game being planned is about in a vague sense so that they can make a character that is appropriate for it. So basically, in this world where we had a variety of characters from different backgrounds, I ended up playing the evil edgelord character because I figured, what the hell? It sounds kind of fun right now. I feel like kind of breaking away from what I usually do. I want to play someone evil, someone sinister, someone who seeks power, but not in the means that is normal for her society, which was Drow society. I grew bored of this character within the first session. And part of it is on me for the way I designed her. I basically built her to be similar to a Dark Eldar from the Warhammer 40,000 universe. If you're at all familiar with that, you'll know what I mean. If you're not, basically think space elves who have become so obsessed with fulfilling their personal desires that their society collapsed. They inadvertently created a demon god based around selfishness, desire, lust, and all these other things. And they fill their time pretty much by murdering one another, fighting other things, kidnapping, torturing, all that kind of edgelord stuff. It was a fun concept, the one I was building, and I had some ideas on how to make it work, but ultimately it was a concept that just proved too shallow to do anything with. And that's kind of a recurring theme when it comes to characters that I've made that I ended up dissatisfied with. I do personally have a bad habit of coming up with concepts that at the moment sound good and fun, but once I start trying to explore them, I realize they're considerably more shallow than I thought. And that was the case here. By the end of the first session, I had already grown completely tired of this character. There wasn't anything I really wanted to explore with her, and so I already started putting into motion plans in my head to swap her out for something different that fit better with the world that we were in. So at a later point, I swapped her out, gave her one more session just to make absolutely sure, swapped her out for something new, and then ended up being completely unable to make any other sessions because my work schedule changed. Such is the way of it. But now let's move on to my latest character. Now, technically, I actually have a couple of options for this because of a one-shot that I ran for my friend Brian, who was moving out of town a couple of weeks ago. However, since I was running the game, and even though I made these antagonists as characters, I'm not going to count them because, technically speaking, they were NPCs that the players were fighting, not actual characters that I made. So I'm going to go instead with Edmund Glass, who is my character in the Star Shatter 3.5 edition sci-fi mod created by Erigmar over on Minds. Edmund is the son of a rancher from a far-off agricultural planet in this universe. He basically lived on a ranch, helped out with repairing some of the machinery, and helped out with protecting the livestock from wild animals and pirates and the like. He learned how to fight, learned how to shoot, learned how to maintain machinery and weaponry, mostly on the farm. But when the call to action came in the form of his chance to join the military in that world, he jumped on it because he knew what it was like to live a relatively difficult life. He understood how easily those things could be swept away by the bad actors in that universe, of which there are plenty. And so he left home, this country bumpkin, to join the military, and in so doing became something of a specialist as a sniper and computer hacker, which is a little surprising, you would think, given that he lived out on a ranch, rural area. But this is a distant future. There's a lot of high-tech machinery that goes into ranching, so even a bumpkin like himself is going to know a thing or two about how to handle these. The game, unfortunately, has been put on pause for about a month and a half, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue it within the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I'm going to be tied up this Saturday because we were playing every other Saturday, but work schedules and one of our players having to move and all these other things just ended up kind of constantly getting in the way. We just had a string of problems, as happens. But I'm really looking forward to getting more into the headspace of Edmund, how he interacts with the other characters in the party, because so far, the other two characters being Marcin and, ashamedly, I've lost the name of the other one. It had a Slavic name, and unfortunately I can't remember it. It's just not coming to me right now. Suffice it to say, the interactions these characters have been having have been a ton of fun. And it has really made it a joy to play that game, and I have been waiting to get back to it. So I'm hoping next weekend after this coming one, we might be able to start playing again. That's a hint, guys. Let's start playing again. Starting to have withdrawals here. Finally now, let's move on to the greatest character. It should come as no surprise to anyone who's been reading my webcomic Phoenix Rising. It should come as no surprise to anyone who's known me for a long enough period of time. My favorite D&D character that I ever made, Regina of Doran, the Pyromancer. One of the four main characters for my webcomic, Phoenix Rising, which is, in part, based on the stories I experienced role-playing as her with these other characters. Now, some of these characters have been changed slightly from who they actually were in the role-plays, in the tabletop games, but Regina, who was solely my own creation, she's grown a lot, but at her core has stayed pretty much the same. The character that you see presented in the webcomic as she is now is pretty much how she was the last time I played her. And I have been playing her and exploring her character in games and in writing off and on for the last 11 or 12 years until now starting the webcomic, working on the webcomic. So as you can see, if this character is one that stuck with me for so long to the point that I finally decided to knuckle down and actually write a currently running webcomic partly centered on her and centered as well on three of the other characters she regularly interacted with, you can see the kind of influence that playing this character had on me. And you can see in ways, and will see as the webcomic goes forward, some of the ways in which she grew and changed over the years. Because she was, in some ways, very different at the start of my role play with her than she was when I started the webcomic. The core of it is still the same. The core of it hasn't changed. And like I said, I'm starting her off pretty much where I left her off when I last played her, but she's had 12 years of growth, 12 years of change, and 12 years in my head to develop the kind of person that she is and the kind of person that she will eventually become. She's my favorite character. I know her intimately, very, very well. And nothing's ever going to change that fact. Even if I have other characters that in the moment are going to be my favorite, I have long since accepted over these 12 years that Regina's always going to hold that top spot. And there's always going to be some desire for me to return to her. Will I ever play her in game again? Yeah, probably, at some point. Will I do it in a long-running campaign? Probably not, because I've already done that. And I'm, in a way, already doing that with the webcomic now, since what happens in the webcomic isn't just up to me. I collaborate with my artist quite a bit on that. She and I plan that stuff together. So, there you have it. My first, worst, latest, and greatest characters. Friends and gamers of all stripes, what are your first, worst, latest, and greatest characters? For the sake of this exercise, for me, because it was simplest, I limited it to Dungeons & Dragons and characters that I was personally satisfied with when determining worst and greatest. But you can determine this any way you want when it comes to your worst and your greatest characters. You don't have to set at one system. You don't have to limit yourself in the way you do this exercise the way I did. The important thing is to share the experience you had with those characters, to share your highs and lows of the game, to reignite that fire in you and that desire to play again so that you can go out and find a game to play in if you don't have one currently, or to keep that flame lit if you're in one now that you're not necessarily the most satisfied with. I look forward to hearing about your characters in the comments below, or even in your own videos if you decide to make one. And if you do, please throw a link to me somewhere, either here on YouTube in the comments below, over at BitChute, or on Minds. Whatever your comments are regarding your characters, I want to hear those stories. If you liked this video and you would like to see more, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit that bell notification icon. Open the description box down below to follow me on my social media pages. I am most active on Minds.com, where you can contact me directly, as well as here on YouTube. You can also follow me over on BitChute, where almost all of my videos have been mirrored, and you will find a couple of pieces of exclusive content. And as always, dear friends and gamers of all stripe, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen, and it is my sincere hope that you continue to roll high, role play well, and game on.